I'd rather just see children at ceremony than children in a bar.
Yeah.
I'm a
Yeah,
recovered alcoholic, addict, and it was like, be just that's normal. It's normalized, right? Like
totally.
drinking, and we can get there. But you you really answered. I believe this next question I had, if you wanted to just add anything to it, but your work at times draws from a lot of applied spiritual traditions, basically magic, for those exploring both plant medicine and magic as they heal and raise children. How should they approach it if they're just starting out, and how important is mentorship? You touched on a lot of it, but if there's any other, finishing touches you'd like before we move on to the next one, that would be great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, a lot of people don't talk about entheogens and magic because it's like kind of niche and woo-woo, but I think it's really great that you brought this forward. Like you were talking about this like reductionist scientific mind state that was like forced even on European people during the 16th century during the witch trials and the witch hunts. This experience of the magical world is ancient. It is our relationship to nature. It is the animism of all of the things. It is it's deplatforming humans as the most important life being on Earth and reestablishing our relationship to all of the ecology, right? It's making ourselves less important and recognizing that like the plants and the animals and the stars and the planets and the dirt under our feet are just as sentient and important and alive as we are. And so I think that's what psilocybin has really taught me and helped me to resituate myself in within a magical world is that I'm magical and so is everything else. And that has brought to me, I think, within the child and the family question is that when I kind of come back to that kind of brain that everything is magical and I am magical and like we are living in a magical reality where time can line up in just such a perfect way like you said, we're right on time and where like circumstances and synchronicity and all these things that I think come really early on in a person's spiritual enveloping. What's magical is that kids already have this. Kids already are at this space, and so for me to be able to return to that and have that as part of my waking life always, because mushrooms have allowed me to kind of like shut down certain parts of my mind that aren't that important and reanimate and reimagine and reignite these imaginative places, then I can actually look at the world the way that my kid does and relate to them in a better way and maybe relate to other people in a better way too, by recognizing the shared humanity and the shared spirit and the shared beauty. And as far as magical practice goes, what I really like to help people remember is that access to a person's own ancestry is very important as far as cultural competency goes. There's a lot of interesting and beautiful things that elders are doing in their own traditions, and that does not necessarily mean that their traditions need to become our own. May they be a shining light for us, right? May they be a lighthouse for us to want to find our own way in our own spiritual traditions and our own spiritual practices and finding our own relationship with our ancestral magic ways. So I really hope that the people listening or that anyone here in the space can actually find some value in their own bloodline and like in their own wandering of the earth, and that there is also a richness in that perspective and that there is a richness in these frameworks and cosmologies, and that everyone is indigenous in their own way and has their own magic system that they can follow and make robust.
Wow, thank you for that. It was amazing. Just personally, my favorite um, byproduct or benefit of psychedelics are just the deeper connection with nature and the younger version, spawn of consciousness of little Brian, and thinking about like how Brian got here, and wait,
Mm-hmm.
how'd my dad get here? How'd my mom get here? How'd my grandma, right? And like going all the way back, but traveling those dimensions in the natural world. And nature is happening all around us at all times, right? These plants behind me are growing. I can't see it, right? They just are. I've been gone for 4 days in my house, and I came back and I saw these new little like shoots and the plants, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is just amazing, right? So getting back in the cycles of nature, I like that you talked about doing a journey on the solstice, the equinox. Those are I fast on those time periods on the calendar, 90 days, 12 weeks, what a quarter, whatever you want to call it. But the equinox is coming up in almost about a month from today.
Yeah.
So getting in the cycles and the rhythms of nature is something that you can't really put into this scientific chart, right? Or protocol, right? I like that you use the word journey, because that's what it is. It's a journey. Like life is a journey. Nature is a journey, and it's happening all around us at all times. So thank you for touching on all of that. And nature is magic, right? Just it is. Go outside and stare at a tree, and leave your phone inside and just stare at a tree and watch what it does. Watch the sky, watch the clouds, watch all of it. So amazing. So in the ABC8 interview, you showed a micro cacao sauce. I can taste that. We at Medicine Box place food in our 7-pillar model of wellness, along with mindfulness, community, collaboration, nature, and recovery, as well as music. And what other foods mix well with these preparations, and which ones don't?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that. And I really do feel in the way that I like to sit and situate medicine is in what I call like the symphony of medicines. So yes, we might be centering one medicine. Maybe the healing or the primary is coming from psilocybin. However, it is like within this like cacophony and this like giant crescendo of many other helpful and beneficial non-human relatives that might come from animal or might come from plant, but at the same time, like they are so interdependent. So food and food ways, I think, are a really important part of a person's general well-being. And when I say food ways, it's not just like this is the food I'm eating, but it's also the food I'm preparing. It's also the food and the way that I'm preparing it, and the way and my relationship to it growing, it being harvested, it being processed, it being made, me eating it. So that's like really where I like to bring a lot of attention to is like any medicine work, any food way, it's not just about consuming it. How do I consume it? I want to consume consent, like intentionally. It's like, can you create with it? Can you? And that's, why I put out these little videos of, what I craft, because I really want to position people from a space of consuming to a space of creating with medicine. So the honey cacao paste is a gorgeous offering, and something that I learned about honey in particular. So honey is particularly congruent and harmonious with the sacred mushroom, and for a lot of different reasons I'm not going to get into, but one of the reasons is that honey can preserve mushrooms. And so if you are looking to keep a hold on your mushrooms, preserving them in honey or floating them in honey can keep them for a lot longer. And some people, they do a technique called blue honey, where they will take honey and then dump mushrooms inside and like let it sit for a really long time. But in my experience as an herbalist, glucose and sugar is not a very good solvent for most of these constituents. So the honey is not going to contain a significant amount of psilocybin within it. You'll actually need to eat the mushroom for that. So what I do is I blend the honey, or I blend the mushrooms and put it in the honey, scoop the honey and eat the totality of it. And this comes from a very like old school way of eating fresh mushrooms, where the Mexica people and the Azteca people would take raw, wet, fresh mushrooms and dump them into a really special wasp honey. And instead of swallowing the mushroom whole or chewing it down and pushing it and digesting it through your gut, they would macerate the mushrooms in their mouth and allow like the juice of the mushrooms to come out and let it be digested in through the roof of their mouth and receive the psilocybin, which is small enough to cross the blood-brain barrier of your mouth, and completely bypass like the gastrointestinal system, which I think is like genius. So, digesting mushrooms through the mouth is something that is not happening with microdosing because everyone is just taking a pill and swallowing it and is missing the sensory, missing the sensual, missing the food part of mushrooms. So honestly, I think more than adding food to mushrooms, I think it's also recognizing that mushrooms can be food and mushrooms can be tasted and mushrooms can be experienced through the mouth and is really important. Other things that people, often connect food ways with mushrooms is cacao, which is very important for a lot of different reasons. And cacao is also very sacred medicine, but generally was never really combined. It was actually drank before the mushrooms. So the cacao would be drank. That is vitalizing the body with helpful constituents and micronutrients to sustain the body energetically for the very long mushroom journey ahead, and also to remineralize what would be lost when the mushrooms were processed by the body. So the body takes a lot of minerals in order to process mushrooms, and in the mushroom experience, there's a lot of caloric burning from the brain. There's also a lot of minerals that are zapped out of that experience. And so the cacao actually kind of prepares the body for that physical load that the mushroom journey will, help us to experience and what it will use in order to experience. So honey and cacao, this is why I like to lean on honey and cacao for these reasons. And also what I kind of found interesting was I was following a bit of like a dieta before. I was kind of approaching the mushroom practice like I was going to approach ayahuasca, where I was like going to eat really bland food or like fast or like stay really, like limited in my food consumption. And what I noticed is I would feel really weak after journeys, or like really burned out or tired or not very strong. And as a space holder, I need to be up all night long and singing songs and tending to people. So how was I going to stay energized? And something that you might notice in the peyote churches, they have the buffalo blessing, right? They'll bring like the buffalo in. And so I actually noticing more and more that it is okay to eat meat in conjunction with preparing or integrating mushroom experiences. And that really surprised me because I was coming out of veganism and Dr. Sebi stuff, and it's like meat is the devil or whatever. And, I totally get all those things. And I also recognizing that there is a huge exchange, carne for carne, like there's a huge exchange that's happening when we relate to these bigger animals. And so if we can find access to like really well tended animal foods, we can feel really nourished in our journeys and in our microdosing experience. And microdosing experiences and even high dose experiences can take a tremendous body load. This is a lot of processing. This is a lot of trauma that we're working through. And feeling strong and being a mother and being nourished is the most important thing that we can be in our family. So, foods that mix well with mushrooms, I'm not saying like eat a steak like during journey, but what I noticed is like having a couple bites of like grass-fed beef jerky like leading into ceremony gave me so much vitality, so much energy, and so much stamina for me to continue to hold space for myself and hold space for other people.
Muy fuerte.
It's important.
Yeah.
It's important to feel strong. Yeah,
I,
absolutely.
I
So
like that you mentioned the maceration of mushrooms. That's exactly how I like making a pouch. My friends are like, dude, oh man, how do you do that? It's like,
I
no,
know.
that's from taking like sublingual tinctures for many, many years. It's
Totally.
like, bioavailability through the mucous membranes in the mouth. That's the best way to get the medicine in there and bypass that second
Absolutely.
pass metabolism in the liver, right? So,
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up because a lot of people do not know that. And something that my friend brings up a lot, she's an amazing herbalist that talks about like flying ointments. And this is kind of not a PG conversation, but I think, I mean, if we're going to talk about motherhood, like let's talk about how babies get here in the first place. Flying ointments are ointments made with entheogenic materials to be used in the orifices crevices of the body. So like the armpits, sublingually, and also the mucosal membranes of like the labia. And so back in the day, when like witches and this like kind of broomstick thing, this iconography around flying witches really had to do with creating these ointments that were entheogen laced. So it's funny you said am amanita instead of amenta, and it's cool that the two words are so similar. They would use amanita and other entheogenic medicines and make like a oil, and then they would put the oil on a broomstick or some kind of other like wooden applicator, and then they would rub it into like their labia, and it would be absorbed through the mucous membrane of that part of their body, and bring them to a celebratory bliss like state. And so this is where we get like yeah, the trope of the flying witch is they're literally flying on Amanita muscaria mushrooms that has been absorbed through their mucous membrane in their labia. So, another way of interacting with entheogens, and my friend literally says like being penetrated from them, by them in these other ways that have nothing to do with your digestive system. So, thought I would offer that as well.
Hey, babe, are you still there? You take some notes on that? Just making a joke here. We can laugh, right?
Yeah,
She might.
no,
She's
Entheogens loops
she's
are great.
an aspiring sexologist, by the way. My
Oh, that's so
partner. Yeah,
wonderful.
she's
Yeah, please.
yeah,
And that's what me and Dennis talked about was like psychedelics and sensuality and intimacy. And I feel like also within this like medical model, it's hard to talk about those things.
yeah. It's like
So
taboo,
it's
right?
not
We
embodied as
can't
a
talk about
practice.
that, right? Like, no, it's this. So, just trying to make a good laugh, everybody. Hopefully that laughed. And okay, now we're gonna go from sober, not somber, and in that same interview, you also mentioned
Mm,
turning to mushrooms to counter an alcohol problem.
mhm.
How does your ongoing work with plant medicine aid you in your sobriety? A topic that is very near and dear to my heart, and from my own personal experience as well. So I'm really excited to hear your perspective on this topic.
Thank you. It's complicated, but it's the dose that makes the poison is the way that I've been able to have a different relationship with sobriety. And I used to also smoke cigarettes habitually, and now I sit with tobacco. And I used to get blackout drunk, and now I lean on tequila as medicine. And so it's been really interesting. The way that mushrooms have really helped me address my alcohol problem was I knew that there was something that I was trying to get away from when I was drinking. There was a frame of reference that I feel like alcohol was helping me with. And the question that I had for myself was, what is the thing that I want to make numb? What is the thing about the social environment that is maybe overwhelming? What is this about the social environment that I do not feel comfortable in, that alcohol is going to help me be more comfortable in? And so every time I wanted to drink, I chose to microdose or sit with mushrooms instead, and got to examine, and instead of going out, I could go in into these situations and environments and pinpoint like, yeah, there's actually something about this environment that I'm not really enjoying very much, that I feel like I want to drink in, in order to cope with being in. So socially, alcohol was the thing that I would lean on when I like got nervous, or I was like maybe feeling like I wasn't a decent enough or interesting enough person as I was. And what I got to learn was that the environment had more to do with me drinking than me wanting to drink. And so after I started adopting psilocybin as a teacher, I started adopting that medicine as a teacher when I was in the throes of sorority and fraternity life. I rushed a sorority in college, and found a lot of issues with the institution. But what it granted me was like a small window into seeing the alcohol culture that was being promoted. And I would be the one person like eating mushrooms and hanging out in the backyard of a giant rager and like smoking stoves and just looking at the stars. And this was before I went ceremonial with my practice, but it came recreational first. And so I would just be really sitting with, where am I? And like, why are people doing all of this? And what am I noticing about the environment? And it helped me to like attune my senses to like what was important socially in the drinking social space. And a lot of those things, even without the alcohol, are really problematic. And there was a lot of like sexual assault happening in those environments. There was a lot of blurred lines happening in those environments. There was a lot of misogyny happening in those environments. A lot of pollution, like red solo cups are like terrible for the environment. There was a lot of aggression happening in the environment. So I am really grateful that the mushrooms actually help kind of allow me to ask the questions around what are the social implications of my drinking? What environments am I like welcoming myself to be in? And how is alcohol playing into my ability to make clear decisions? Because I was making decisions that were causing me a lot of harm. And I noticed that when I was with mushrooms, I made better choices. I made choices that considered my body. I made I made choices that considered my well-being. Um, and that really surprised me. I thought maybe psilocybin would help me like not want to drink anymore. But what psilocybin and a lot of the other earth medicines allowed me to do was bring up these questions around the behavior of drinking, the social implication of my drinking, and the trauma associated with why I even wanted to drink in the first place. And for them, I'm really grateful. And there's a lot of amazing advocates right now that are doing psychedelics in recovery as a model
Hmm.
and infusing the 12 step with a psychedelic recovery journey. And even I'm sure as you know, like the creator of 12 step um,
LW
had a relationship with LSD, and
loved
LSD was
LSD.
was LSD was supposed to be a part of like the system for which all of these incredible practices
Yeah.
like doing reconciliation work and like accepting a spiritual practice and doing all these incredible things that would just be helpful for just anyone with the assistance of an entheogen. So I also really do believe that the recovery industrial complex is also super nefarious and actually relies on people staying addicted.